Good morning, everybody. Several weeks ago, I talked about an idea, new version of a buff bard, a character that would allow you to level easily while also giving loads of buffs to all of your allies. And today, I have just that build for you. It's very similar to the original one that I had proposed, with a couple tweaks here and there. So, how exactly does it work? Well, there's the new Acolyte of the Skin, and it is pretty good. One of its best features is that you can get all of the Warlock stuff without actually having to be a Warlock. With only one level of Acolyte of the Skin, you can get full Acolyte of the Skin damage, which is very cool, and give you an Eldritch Blast to let you stay out of melee combat, which is pretty nice, as well as dealing a fair amount of damage. Now, important note about this build, this is not a number one top DPS build, because it's a support character. You get all of the supportive buffs. You get to give your allies spell critical chance, melee damage, movement speed, physical, magical resistance rating, hit and damage, and all sorts of stuff, and it's super duper powerful from the buffing perspective. On top of that, you can basically play the role of full healer all the way up through R5 to 7 with just close wounds, and several abilities out of Exalted Angel. So as a result, your character has an incredible amount of utility, on top of the fact that it's very easy to stack evocation DCs and freeze monsters with Bursts of Glacial Wrath, as well as having very cool debuffs launching all over your Eldritch Blast you're using on enemies. But it's just not the best damage, which, again, if you're watching this video and you want a top damage character, I don't know what to tell you. This is Support Bard, so, I got lots of other videos. Maybe click another one. But the reason why this character is so great is because generally when you level a Support Bard, you kind of have to do it almost always either as a melee or even if you decide to go Spellsinger. The problem with Spellsinger is that you really want the tier 5 of the Spellsinger tree. You really want that Horn of Thunder, which kind of brings everything together. But if you have Horn of Thunder, then unfortunately your character doesn't get a lot of the cool endgame buffs that people really want, like the percentage melee damage and the spell critical chance, both of which are some of the best buffs you can get in the entire game. The benefit of this character is that its damage is just passive. You just hold down the mouse button and keep Eldritch blasting out damage. And while it may not be the best, it's more than enough to be able to solo level, and you're still adding a fair amount of damage onto enemies as you're attacking, helping out the party. Plus, you're literally going to be welcome in any group, because if somebody needs a healer, you can just raise your hand and be like, oh, that's me, that's me, that's me. On top of that, this character gets its healing capacity super duper early, gaining close wounds by level 4, allowing you to basically fully heal people the entire way through the game. This character will also make a fantastic addition to Hardcore League. The War Chanter tree, which is your primary tree on this character, is a tankier tree, granting you bonus hit points, physical resistance rating, and other stuff, which means that this character is able to comfortably get relatively good tank stats, a good amount of health, a good amount of physical resistance rating, on top of actually still having, like I said, the damage, the buffing, the debuffing capability. So, is this better than the old buff bard? In my opinion, I think so. The old buff bard that I put out was more of a melee supportive type character where you're using strike through on two-handed weapons to get multiple freezes, whereas this character has a spell that it can use instead, so it can just be at ranged and not have to deal with getting into melee range. On top of that, it's much easier to debuff targets because you can apply debuffs through your weapons, and the debuffs can propagate through your Eldritch Blast, whereas a melee bard you have to actually kind of be in melee. And then on top of that, this character just gets to do a little bit of damage to every monster at the same time, and in current AoE meta, which is what the game is right now, where AoE spellcasters are dominating everything, even though there are some adjustments and changes coming in the future to reduce the damage of the AoE meta, it's still going to be there. And having a bard who is able to just apply a little bit of extra damage to every single monster in the room, as opposed to damaging one monster, like a melee bard would be doing, will mean that those AoE spellcasters who used to be able to one-shot monsters who can't, now you can just soften up a tiny bit, and that just allows everybody to get the one-shots done. Now, some of you might be asking, obviously, if you don't have access to the Favored Soul, is there a way you can replace it? And the answer is, not really. Favored Soul is really, really good here because it gives you access to Closed Wounds, which is super duper strong, and it is a heal that is so good, it will carry you all the way through level 32 and be useful at level 32. You could use, Cleric or something else if you really wanted to, but again, you're just missing out on so much. Sure, you can get a Cure Moderate Wounds spell-like ability, and it's kind of Closed Wounds adjacent, but it's really not the same thing. So while this character is largely free to play, you're still going to want to have Favored Soul. Now granted, you can always access the Favored Soul by just earning 2500 favor in game, which should be easy since the coupon is going on right now, where you can put coupon code Dungeon Crawl into the client and gain access to all the quest content, so 2500 favor is a breeze as long as you don't mind running a whole bunch of quests. And then you get to unlock a fantastic class for Dungeons & Dragons Online. But if you don't have it, you're going to have to do that before you get this character. Or you kind of like just buy it in the store. Whichever idea fits best for you, just make sure you think about that, especially if you want to start this on Hardcore League. You will have to have bought it out of the DDO store because your account-wide unlocks don't stay on Hardcore because it's a new Hardcore every time. So just keep that in mind. Overall, this character, I think, is going to perform very, very well in in-game content. I wouldn't be surprised if you see more people adopting a similar style with Acolyte of the Skin. I think the Acolyte of the Skin is really what the glue that brings all of this together, and you're going to see more builds involving the Acolyte of the Skin doing similar things, using the Eldritch Blast to give them some free damage. That way the character can focus all of its other abilities in other places. I have some ideas on how to do this with some different characters in the future, but again, it's a bit wonky because you still have to deal with Arcane Spell Failure, so I thought about maybe making a fighter that can do this, but heavy armor, it doesn't really work as well. So again, I'm still working on it, and we'll see exactly how that goes. But if you want to see how to build this character, I'm going to pass it over to me with the build. Why buff when you can kill? Is the question you're going to be asking yourself all the time when you play the new stock standard version of the modern buffer bard. You see, buff bard has this problem where they kind of just like stand around a lot and don't do as much damage as other characters. However, this character gets to completely bypass that limitation with the Acolyte of the Skin, something I've been very excited to kind of mull over, talk about, and share with all of you. And so this character is the my personal new version of Buff Bard. I'll be rolling something into this soon. This is just kind of like the preview here after some testing. We've got Bard 13, Favored Soul 5, and 2 Acolyte of the Skin. The Bard is for all the important Bard buffs and abilities. We have the Favored Soul for a huge amount of healing, which is very necessary for the build to make you even more supportive. And Acolyte of the Skin gives you all of your damage during the leveling process. As far as your stats go, Constitution for health and Charisma for your damage as well as your buffing ability. Charisma is kind of like the bread and butter of this build, so you max this out, and Constitution. As far as your saves go and your defense, this character actually comes with a lot of shield mastery feats, allowing it to be tanky as well. You can use shields, you don't necessarily have to, but I would recommend something along the lines of like Shield of the Scorpion, something relatively lightweight, but that really pulls its own weight in terms of the defense. Pretty much any large shield is pretty good, like the Giant's Platter, something like that. Just really kind of covers it in at the end game. During the leveling process, though, you don't need a shield. This is mostly just for like end game stuff to give you extra tankiness in raids, so you can cap out that magic resistance rating and have closer to 160, 170 physical resistance rating, which is really nice on a caster. For skills, just make sure you have Perform. All the other stuff is kind of irrelevant, but Perform is the most important one. If you don't perform, you can't do your Bard stuff. The level for this character is kind of wonky. I took like 2 Warlock lives, then 2 Favored Soul, then a Bard, then more Favored Soul, and I kind of went all over the place. So please refer to the build you'll find in the description for the exact leveling path. But you just make sure, don't forget to max out your Perform. But I used Heal, Perform, Jump, Spellcraft, and a couple points in Tumble, just so I can tumble because I like rolling around because it's fun. As far as the feats go, you are taking lots of meta magic feats. You need Empower, Maximize, and Quicken. Empower and Maximize are for several of your spell-like abilities that you get on this character. And then same thing with Quicken. Quicken's just for all of your spells. It's pretty great. And Empower and Maximize specifically you take right away, like 1 and 2, level 1 and level 3, because your character is able to get access to Close Wounds, one of the best heals for leveling purposes, which means this character, with access to Close Wounds, is able to solo play through Reaper mode on a First Life character, which is very cool thanks to this Close Wounds ability. So if you're somebody who likes to play solo, this character can work well for you. As you level up, I also took a couple of the defensive feats, such as the Shield Mastery, which I don't know where it is on here, so I can't find it, but I took Shield Mastery and stuff. However, one of the important things is the new Warlock Acolyte of the Skin feature, where you can take the Pact Attunement feats. These feats, Lesser Pact Attunement, Greater Pact Attunement, and Ultimate Pact Attunement, are granted to Acolytes of the Skin as they level up. But, similar to how the Monk Stance feats work, you can take this as long as you happen to have the Acolyte of the Skin levels. So you start with Pact Attunement at 1. Because I have 2 levels of the Acolyte of the Skin, I can take this feat at level 6, which I did. gaining extra damage. Then I took Greater Pact at 12 and Ultimate Pact at 18, allowing my character to do the damage of a full Warlock with only 2 levels. Now granted, unfortunately because I only have 2 Warlock, I can't take the upgraded Eldritch Blast feats in Epics, but that's actually okay for 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is you have a lot of other Bard abilities you want to take, such as Bardic or Inspiration Melody Excellence, which is super good, giving you and all your allies +2 bonus to all ability scores. But on top of that, you're taking Emboldened Spell, Intensify, Burst of Glacial Wrath. You don't got room for any of those other feats. Additionally, grabbing Perfect Shield Mastery and Two-Handed Mastery, again, you got to read the green text, gives you increased hit point bonus of heroic durability. You're not using a two-handed weapon on this character, and you don't even have to use the shield. Just by taking these feats, you get a percentage increase on your hit points, which is why we take them. As well, Lasting Inspiration might seem odd, but that's actually because of one of the abilities we'll talk about later, the Sustaining Song, that allows you to heal people over time with your Bard songs. That healing scales with your Bardic levels on Inspiration. This gives you 6, so it increases the power of that. As far as your spells go, I'm not going to talk too much about the Warlock and Favorite Soul. Just like kind of take whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's the Bard spells that matter a little bit more. You want to make sure you have Good Hope, because this gives a +2 morale bonus to weapon damage. And morale bonuses are very rare in DDO. Bard songs used to be morale, and a bunch of other things used to be morale. But as far as I know, the only thing that gives a morale bonus to weapon damage is Good Hope in the game. I could be wrong about that, but I think this is the only way to get it. So you want to make sure you have this for buffing up your party. Haste and Displacement, don't really need a lot of explanation there. Dimension Door feels really good. Greater Heroism is just good for everybody in your party. And then, of course, Freedom of Movement as well. So at the beginning of a quest, you can buff people with your Bard Song, Blur, Freedom of Movement, and Greater Heroism to make sure everybody has all the spells that they need. And then Dispel Magic is just good for getting rid of spell words as you go later in the game. Now let's talk enhancements. Now, enhancements is a lot of how this character works because most of it's spent in the Bard stuff to give your characters the buffs. So, what do you take out of the War Chanter tree? Well, you take all the buff stuff. Increased hit chance for your allies. You get more defenses against elemental damage. You get increased physical resistance rating. You get double strike and double shot, as well as universal spell power. You get spell critical and percentage-based damage. One of the best damage effects in the whole game, Chant of Power, right here. And 20% hit points. Even though you're a ranged character, you get 20% hit points out of the War Chanter tree, which might seem like a big sacrifice, but for this character, it's actually not that big of a deal. This is pretty stock standard. This is what you can expect out of most buff bards. You can actually save a lot of points here and pick up a lot of positive spell power because you're not taking any of this freezing stuff because, again, you're not a melee, you're a Eldritch Blaster. The Spellsinger tree is used for getting increases to your Bardic Inspiration levels for your Inspiration Melody Sustaining Song, as well as having access to Song of Arcane Might and Melody Trance. I used to, in the build, have Frolic. I thought Frolic would be the play here, but there are very few scenarios where people are getting their buffs wiped off of them. And if they are, Beholders don't really have anything that you would need Freedom of Movement for. Which are one of the D spells in the game. So at that point, you don't really need Frolic. It's nice to have because you can use it for the earlier levels, but just cast Freedom of Movement and you should be fine. And then the extra cash levels is good for you because you have 3 separate classes. So the +1 cash level actually helps out all of the cash level for all of your classes, which is kind of nice. Then Tainted Scholars, which you're going to be using here for your actual damage. You get Chain, you get Underdark Blast, so your base damage scales off of light spell power instead of force, which is good. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, because you only need light, fire, and even though you're a bard with sonic spells, you need light, fire, and devotion, nothing else. So turning this into light is very, very good. And then you get extra fire damage here. And then, of course, as I said, Beacon of Hope gives you closed wounds. This is basically the best heal in the game for leveling, and it even carries all the way through the end game. So again, it's very, very good. The points are really tight here. You could probably cut some stuff. You could probably cut like Song of Arcane Might if you really didn't think you needed it, and maybe fill up on Faint Health and get some more extra movement speed from Fleeting Footsteps, but it's really tight. So I don't know the best course of action. This is how I think it's the best setup, but your mileage may vary. Another important thing about this is the order. How are you supposed to put the points in? Well, the order kind of puts itself together. It's really, really easy. You start with Warlock at 1, so fill out Tainted Scholar exactly like this as soon as you can. Then you start taking Favored Soul at level 2, so fill out the Favored Soul Beacon of Hope tree exactly like this afterwards. Then you start taking Spellsinger at level 5, so start filling out level 6, so starts filling out the Spellsinger tree exactly like this, and finally end on the War Chanter. The War Chanter stuff is really powerful, but it's like good for buffing, good for melees, good for raids. And you're not doing that during the leveling process. For the most part, during the leveling process, you kind of need to be self-sufficient. You need to be doing damage and healing people, and those are kind of the main crux of the things. Most people can like do things with their characters. You don't need to be that big augmenting battery right away. You want your character to function. So this character is the easiest one I've ever put a guide together before. Fill out Tainted Scholar exactly, then fill out Beacon of Hope exactly, then fill out Spellsinger exactly, and then fill out War Chanter in that order. Don't deviate at all. You'll be very happy with your experience. Now, let's talk about Epic Destinies. This is where it gets a little bit complicated, and it's, maybe a little bit more confusing. I went with Exalted Angel because I found that if you're being a supportive bard, Angelic Form, the extra damage here procs off of your Eldritch Blast. It's one of the few actual Epic Destiny mantles that works with Eldritch Blast, so it's very powerful here, considering you do only light and fire damage. Remember, the Eldritch Blast, Utter Dark Blast, turns it into evil, which scales off of light spell power. Your pact is fire, so light and fire, light and fire. I mean, it's all kind of coming together here. On top of that, you have a passive AoE heal that heals all of your friends that are standing nearby you for a huge amount. You get a major heal and Cure Moderate Mass, so now you have a big mass heal. You get Holy Fireball, which allows you to just kind of clear the way, which is fantastic. Very, very good for this build. And if you need to reposition, you get Angelic Charge with a short cooldown, and it even heals you and your friends when you use it. Just a great ability the entire time. And as I said, I think you should be using shields at endgame. Just having a shield in your hand is so defensive for this style of character because you don't really need the offense afforded by having some other weapon type. Just have some dinosaur bones, something in your main hand for debuffing and whatever it is. So maybe you have like an ash weapon because you have a bunch of casters, or you have a dust weapon because you have a bunch of melees, whatever it is you happen to have. And then use the Unyielding Sentinel with the shield. The only time you would sack the shield is because you want to have double debuffing weapons. If that's the case, then obviously you're going to have to rethink the Unyielding Sentinel tree. But for all intents and purposes, the shield stuff is super powerful. And then Draconic Incarnation. This build really wants you to have 62 points, which is where you get some extra Destiny Tomes, because you really want to be able to finish off Red Dragon Breath here for that extra 3 seconds off the cooldown, and you'd really want to get Draconic Heritage 1 for the 5% spell cost and no materials. But like with 60 points, this is the absolute tightest I could make this, and you can't really cut anything here. So in my opinion, if you happen to have like a Destiny Tome lying around, it's really helpful to fill this, or if you have some extra points. But that being said, unfortunately, that's pretty much all you kind of can squeeze in there. But build will work super well. A lot of endgame damage. We got healing. You've got the extra damage from Angelic Form really shoring up the damage on your Eldritch Blast. And again, you're picking up Renewal as well. So your general healing pattern is Renewal is the main heal with the Close Wounds as like basically this constant heal that you're pumping into people. If there's a lot of people taking damage, you can Cure Moderate Mass them. And as a result, this character can debuff all the way through R10s, can buff all the way through R10s, can deal a good amount of damage and feel comfortable doing damage, probably up through R4 to 5s, feel comfortable just doing damage. In R10s, you're still pulsing out damage over top of stuff, especially Holy Fireball, especially Burst of Glacial Wrath, which I said you're taking, which freezes entire rooms. You're still helping out a lot. It's just not going to be like, you're no Alchemist, you're no Druid, right? But you can be a full healer right up through R4, R5. You can be a support healer. Depending on your group, you might even be able to be a full healer even through R7 to 10 if you have like a tank, you have somebody working crowd control, stuff like that. People are mitigating damage. You could probably do full healing, but it's going to be a little bit harder. And this is an easy, like normal hard raid healer. And again, you're also debuffing at the same time. So you've got a lot of options. And then on top of that, remember, you're not just like, oh, I'm like healing the raid. I'm doing some damage. Your character also has every bard buff. So you have temporary hit points coming out. Plus, was it 6 to hit or 8 to hit and damage coming out of your character? 6% double strike, double shot. You've got the percentage damage, everything else. Your character is an absolute group machine, and it is very, very good. As far as the gear, I don't know. Check the resource below as to what you should actually use, because I'm going to figure that out after the posting of this video, because I'm on a time crunch, because Lamania is shutting down, and I won't be able to show this off for much longer. So, check if you want it. There'll be a link with the gear I think is best. It's going to be like a raid gear set, because again, it's going to be kind of focusing on that, or maybe not, I don't know. But I'm only going to put one gear set together, and hopefully it gives you some ideas about what you should be doing. But with that being said, that's all I have. So thank you so much for watching. If you like what you saw, then make sure you throw your headphones out the window and jump up and down on that subscribe button and the like button. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. Thank you. Bye-bye. Fade away into black. Fade to black. Fade to black. Fade to black. Crossfade. Star wipe.